My husband hit me in front of his mother, but her reaction shocked everyone in the room. I married him when I was 23, fresh out of college with a degree in graphic design and stars in my eyes. He was charming, successful, and his mother seemed like the sweetest woman alive. She'd bake cookies for every family dinner and tell me how lucky her son was to have found me. The first time he grabbed my arm too hard, I convinced myself it was an accident. The first time he pushed me during an argument, I told myself he'd had a bad day at work. By our second anniversary, I'd become an expert at hiding bruises under long sleeves and explaining away the fear in my eyes. But I never imagined it would happen in front of his mother. We were at their family estate for Sunday dinner, a tradition I'd learned to dread. I was setting the table when I accidentally knocked over a wine glass. It shattered across the hardwood floor, red liquid spreading like blood. "You stupid bitch," my husband hissed, grabbing my hair before I could react. "Do you know how much that glass cost?" Before I could apologize, his hand connected with my face. The slap echoed through the dining room. I stumbled backward, my cheek burning, tears springing to my eyes. For a moment, everything went silent. Then I heard footsteps. His mother had been in the kitchen. She'd heard everything. She walked into the dining room, and I prepared myself for what I knew was coming. She'd make excuses for him, tell me I shouldn't have been so clumsy, suggest I needed to be more careful about upsetting her son. Instead, she walked past me without a word. My heart sank. But then she opened the antique cabinet in the corner, the one she always kept locked, the one none of us were ever allowed to touch. She pulled out a gun. "Get away from her," she said, her voice completely calm as she pointed it at her own son. "Now." My husband's face went white. "Mom, what are you?" I said now. Her hand didn't shake. "Sit down in that chair and don't move." He obeyed, something I'd never seen him do. I stood frozen, blood dripping from my split lip onto my white blouse. His mother turned to me then, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes I'd never noticed before. Recognition, understanding, and beneath it, a rage so deep it made my blood run cold. "How long?" she asked quietly. 2 years, I whispered. She nodded slowly, then reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She dialed without taking her eyes off her son. "Yes. I need to report a domestic violence incident," she said when someone answered. "My son just assaulted his wife in front of me. We're at 847 Maple Ridge Estate. Please send someone immediately." My husband started to stand. The gun came up. "Sit down." He sat. While we waited for the police, his mother finally spoke again. "I was married to his father for 30 years, she said, her voice eerily steady. "He put me in the hospital 4 times, broke my arm twice, gave me a concussion that left me with permanent damage." She paused. "I never had anyone to help me, no one who believed me. No one who would stand up to him." She looked at her son then, and the disgust on her face was absolute. "I swore that if I ever saw my son become the monster his father was, I would do what no one did for me. I've been watching, waiting, hoping I was wrong." Her voice cracked for the first time. "But I wasn't wrong, was I?" He said nothing. The sirens grew closer. His mother turned to me. "Pack a bag. Take anything valuable. You're not coming back here." When I hesitated, she added, "Trust me." I ran upstairs, my hands shaking as I threw clothes into a suitcase. When I came back down, police officers were handcuffing my husband. He was screaming at his mother, cursing her, threatening her. She stood unmoved, the gun now on the dining room table, telling the officers everything she'd witnessed. She told them about bruises she'd seen me cover, about my flinching, about the fear in my eyes she'd noticed but said nothing about until now. As they led him away, his mother pulled me aside. "There's something else you need to know," she said quietly. "Something about why I've been documenting everything for the past 6 months." She led me to her home office, a room I'd only been in once or twice. From a locked drawer in her desk, she pulled out a thick manila folder. Inside were dozens of photographs, all time-stamped and dated. Photos of me at family dinners with visible bruises. Photos of my car parked at the emergency room at 2 a.m. Screenshots of text messages I'd sent her, canceling plans with vague excuses about being sick or tired. "I knew," she said simply. "I've known for months. I started documenting everything the night you showed up to dinner with a black eye and claimed you'd walked into a door." I stared at her, confused and overwhelmed. "But you never said anything. You never tried to—" "I needed evidence," she interrupted. "Real, documented evidence that would hold up in court. Because I knew that when the time came, I needed to make sure he couldn't talk his way out of it." She paused, her jaw tightening. "His father always did. Every single time." She pulled out another folder, this one even thicker than the first. This one contained financial documents, bank statements, property deeds, business records. "For the past year, I've been working with a lawyer," she continued, "quietly transferring assets, setting things in motion, building a case." She looked at me directly. "My son doesn't know this yet, but I own 51% of his company. I structured it that way when I gave him the startup capital 5 years ago. He thought it was a gift. It wasn't." My mind was reeling. "I don't understand. Why would you—" "You will," she said firmly. "Come with me. You're staying here tonight, in the guest house, where you'll be safe. Tomorrow, we're going to the courthouse together." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the comfortable bed in her guest house, my face throbbing where my husband had hit me, trying to process everything that had happened in the span of a few hours. My entire life had been upended. My marriage was over. My husband was in jail. And his mother, the woman I'd always seen as meek and accommodating, had revealed herself to be something entirely different. Someone who'd been planning and preparing and waiting for the right moment to act. I kept replaying the moment in my mind. The sound of the gun coming out of the cabinet, The steady calm in her voice as she pointed it at her own son, the way she'd called the police without hesitation, the way she'd looked at him with such clear disgust and disappointment. At some point around 3 a.m., there was a soft knock on the door. It was his mother, carrying 2 mugs of tea and wearing a thick robe against the night chill. She sat down in the chair beside my bed without asking permission, and I was grateful for the company. I didn't want to be alone with my thoughts anymore. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly, "about why I waited so long. When his father was alive, I tried to leave 3 times," she began. "The first time, I was 24 years old. We'd been married for 2 years. He'd broken my wrist during an argument about dinner being cold. I packed a bag while he was at work and took a bus to my parents' house 3 states away." She took a sip of tea, and I noticed her hands were shaking slightly. "He found me within 48 hours. I still don't know how. He showed up at my parents' front door with flowers and apologies. He cried, he begged, he promised he'd change. My parents believed him. They told me every marriage has rough patches. They told me I needed to try harder to be a good wife." She laughed bitterly. "So I went back with him, and that night he broke my collarbone. He told me if I ever tried again, he'd kill my parents and make it look like an accident. I felt sick." "Did you believe him?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Because 2 weeks later, my father's car mysteriously had its brake lines cut. He survived, but barely. My husband never said a word about it. He didn't have to. The message was clear." "What about the second time?" I asked quietly. "The second time I was smarter. I waited 5 years. I planned carefully. I contacted a domestic violence shelter and they helped me create a new identity. I had a social security card, a driver's license, everything under a different name. I was staying with my sister in another state working as a waitress under the table while I saved money for an apartment." She set down her teacup with a soft clink. "I made it a week. 7 days of sleeping soundly, of not jumping at every sound, of believing I might actually be free. Then my sister's house burned down in the middle of the night. She got out, her husband got out, their kids got out. But everything they owned was gone. The fire marshal ruled it arson, but couldn't find any evidence pointing to a specific person." She looked at me, but I knew. I called my husband and told him I was coming home. The next day, my sister received an anonymous donation of $50,000 in an envelope. Guilt money. I couldn't find words. The cruelty of it was staggering. "The third time," she continued, "I had professional help. A women's shelter, a new identity, a support system, everything arranged. I was gone for 3 months. 3 whole months of therapy and healing and believing I'd actually escaped." "What happened?" I whispered. "He found me because I made one mistake. Just one. I called to check on my son. He was 12 years old and I missed him so desperately I couldn't bear it. I was so careful. I used a payphone. I called during the day when I knew his father would be at work. I talked to him for 5 minutes. 5 minutes after 3 months of silence." She wiped her eyes and I realized she was crying. "His father traced the call. I don't know how. Maybe he had the house phones monitored. Maybe he'd been waiting for me to break. But 3 days later, he showed up at the apartment where I was staying. And when he dragged me back, he made me watch while he hurt my son. Nothing permanent, nothing that would show, just enough to make his point. He told me that every time I tried to leave, every time I even thought about leaving, he'd make our son pay the price." I felt tears running down my own face now. "So I stopped trying," she said. "I endured another 18 years. 18 years of walking on eggshells, of hiding bruises, of lying to doctors and friends and family. 18 years of dying inside a little more each day, until the day he had a massive heart attack in his office and died before the paramedics could arrive." She looked at me. "My son was 30 by then. I thought maybe he'd be different, but then I started noticing things. The way you flinched, the way you'd apologize for things that weren't your fault. Why didn't you say something then?" I asked. "Because I needed to be absolutely certain, and I needed time to put all the pieces in place. I needed to make sure that when I finally acted, you'd be protected. Not just that day, but long-term, financially, legally, permanently." The next morning, we went to the courthouse as she'd promised. My husband had been released on bail, courtesy of his expensive lawyer. He was probably at our house right now, destroying my things, leaving me threatening voicemails and texts. I'd turned off my phone hours ago. I couldn't bear to look at the messages I knew would be there. But his mother's lawyer was waiting for us outside the courthouse with documents already prepared and a confidence that put me slightly at ease. A restraining order, filed and approved overnight thanks to the severity of the incident and his mother's detailed witness statement, divorce papers, ready to be served. And something else that I didn't understand at first. "Mrs. Whitfield has transferred full ownership of your joint home to you," the lawyer explained, spreading documents across the small table in the courthouse meeting room. "The property was purchased with funds from the family trust, which she controls as executor. She's also granted you a $200,000 settlement from that same trust to help you get back on your feet and cover legal expenses." I stared at her, then at the lawyer, then back at her. "I can't accept that. That's too much. It's not enough," she said firmly. "Not for what you've been through. Not for what my son did to you. Not for the 2 years he stole from your life." The lawyer continued, flipping through more documents. "Additionally, as majority shareholder of Whitfield Consulting, Mrs. Whitfield has voted to remove her son from his position as CEO, effective immediately. He'll be given the option to sell his minority shares back to the company at current market value, or he can remain a silent investor with no operational control whatsoever. The board has already voted to approve this measure. My husband's company, his pride and joy, gone. He's going to fight this," I said. "Let him try," his mother replied. "I have documentation of his assault. I have proof of previous incidents. And I have a very good lawyer." She smiled without warmth. "My son inherited his father's temper, but he didn't inherit his intelligence. His father made sure I could never touch his business. My son made me his partner. Over the next week, everything moved at a speed that made my head spin. My husband tried to fight the restraining order and failed. The judge looked at the photographs, listened to his mother's testimony about what she'd witnessed, and extended it from 30 days to 6 months without hesitation. He tried to challenge his mother's control of the company and failed. His own corporate documents, the ones he'd signed 5 years ago without reading carefully, proved she had the authority to do exactly what she'd done. He hired 3 different lawyers in rapid succession, each of whom quit after reviewing the evidence against him and realizing this was a case they couldn't win and didn't want attached to their names. The photographs his mother had taken, combined with medical records she'd somehow obtained through legal channels with my signed permission, painted an undeniable picture. Emergency room visits for a sprained wrist that I'd claimed happened when I slipped on ice. For cracked ribs that I'd said resulted from a fall down the stairs. For a concussion I'd blamed on slipping in the shower. All time-stamped, all documented, all connected by dates that corresponded to arguments we'd had or times when he'd been drinking heavily. His mother had even installed hidden cameras in her dining room 3 months ago, after a dinner where she'd watched him grab my arm under the table hard enough to make me gasp. The footage was damning. She had video of him grabbing my arm at another dinner hard enough to leave bruises that lasted for days, of him shoving me against a wall in the hallway when he thought no one was looking, of him berating me in harsh whispers while his mother pretended to be out of earshot, but was actually watching through the kitchen doorway. "You recorded your own son," I said to her one evening. "I recorded a crime in progress," she corrected. "There's a difference." The criminal case moved forward. My husband's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor wanted jail time. Meanwhile, I moved into the house that was now solely mine. My husband's belongings had been removed by a moving company while he was in court, under police supervision to ensure he didn't violate the restraining order. Everything he owned was packed into boxes and taken to a storage unit that his mother paid for. I didn't ask what happened to those boxes later. I didn't want to know. I changed every lock in the house. Front door, back door, garage, even the shed. I installed a state-of-the-art security system with cameras at every entrance and motion sensors in the yard. I bought new furniture to replace anything that reminded me of him. The couch where he used to sit, drinking and yelling at the television. The dining room table where I'd learned to eat in silence. The bed we'd shared, where I'd lie awake waiting for him to come home and wondering what mood he'd be in. All of it went. I donated what I could, threw away what I couldn't. And I began the slow, painful process of reclaiming my space and my life. I painted the walls in colors I actually liked, instead of the neutrals he'd insisted on because they were more sophisticated. I hung artwork that I'd created or bought from local artists. I arranged furniture the way I wanted it, not the way he'd demanded it be placed. His mother visited often, helping me repaint walls in colors I actually liked, replace furniture to erase memories, hang new curtains that let in more light. One afternoon, as we were hanging new curtains in the bedroom, curtains in a soft blue that he would have hated, I finally asked the question that had been haunting me since that Sunday dinner. "Why did you wait so long? If you knew 6 months ago, if you'd been documenting everything for months, why didn't you do something sooner?" She was quiet for a long moment, carefully smoothing out a wrinkle in the fabric before she answered. "Because I needed to be absolutely sure," she said finally. "I needed evidence that would stick, evidence that couldn't be explained away or dismissed. I needed time to protect you financially so you wouldn't be dependent on him or anyone else. I needed time to build legal safeguards so he couldn't manipulate the system the way his father always did." She paused, her hand stilling on the curtain. "And I needed time to prepare myself to lose my son." "What do you mean?" She turned to look at me and I saw tears in her eyes for the first time since this all began. Because that's what this meant. The moment I pulled that gun, the moment I called the police on my own child, I knew I was choosing you over him. I knew he would never forgive me for it. I knew I was ending whatever relationship we had left, if we even had one anymore. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I gave birth to him. I raised him. I loved him with everything I had. And I watched him become the monster I'd tried so desperately to protect him from. At some point, I had to decide whether my love for my son was more important than keeping another woman from going through what I went through. "I'm sorry," I said. She shook her head. "Don't be sorry. I should have done this 30 years ago. I should have found the courage to leave his father, to protect my son from growing up in that house. Maybe if I had, he wouldn't have become this person." She wiped her eyes. "I failed him as a mother. I won't fail you the same way." The trial happened 4 months later. My husband's lawyer was good, there was no denying that. He managed to get the charges reduced from felony assault to misdemeanor assault with a domestic violence enhancement. But even with the reduction, the judge wasn't lenient. She'd reviewed all the evidence, watched the videos, looked at the medical records spanning 2 years. "Mr. Whitfield," the judge said, looking directly at my ex-husband, "you systematically abused your wife for years. You isolated her from her friends and family. You prevented her from working. You used physical violence to control her. And when your own mother tried to intervene, you made threats against her life. This court takes domestic violence very seriously." She sentenced him to 6 months in county jail, 3 years of probation after release, mandatory anger management classes twice a week for the duration of probation, required domestic violence counseling, and a permanent restraining order that would follow him for the rest of his life. When the sentence was read, my husband turned in his seat and looked directly at his mother. The hatred in his eyes was visceral. It was the kind of look that would have made me flinch away, but she met his gaze without flinching, without looking away, without showing any sign of the pain I knew she must be feeling. "I hope you rot in hell," he mouthed at her. "I've already been there," she said loud enough for the entire courtroom to hear. Your father took me there for 30 years. I'm not going back. After the trial, I thought things would get easier. In some ways, they did. I didn't jump at every sound anymore. I stopped having nightmares. I could wear short sleeves without worrying about questions. But in other ways, the aftermath was harder than the abuse itself. I had to learn how to be myself again. For 2 years, I'd molded my entire existence around avoiding his anger. I'd stopped seeing friends because he didn't like them, said they were bad influences, said they were trying to turn me against him. I'd quit my job because he said a wife of his shouldn't need to work, should be home taking care of the house and eventually children. I'd given up hobbies because he said they were a waste of time and money. I'd stopped expressing opinions that differed from his because disagreeing meant hours of arguments that sometimes ended in violence. I'd made myself as small and invisible and agreeable as possible. And somewhere along the way, I'd lost track of who I actually was underneath all of that. Now I had to figure out who I was when I wasn't terrified, when I wasn't calculating every word before I spoke, when I wasn't walking on eggshells and trying to predict his moods and head off his anger before it could explode. His mother helped with that too. She introduced me to her therapist, Dr. Rodriguez, who specialized in domestic violence survivors. The first session was hard. I sat in that comfortable office with its soft lighting and gentle music and couldn't find words. I cried for 40 minutes straight while Dr. Rodriguez just sat there, patient and understanding, occasionally handing me tissues but never rushing me. Over the next months, therapy became my anchor. We worked on identifying the patterns of abuse, on understanding that none of it had been my fault, on rebuilding my sense of self-worth that had been systematically destroyed. Dr. Rodriguez taught me about trauma responses, about why I still flinched at sudden movements, about why certain things triggered panic attacks. She taught me coping mechanisms and grounding techniques. She helped me understand that healing wasn't linear, that some days I'd feel strong and some days I'd feel like I was back at square one, and that both were normal and okay. His mother helped me reconnect with the friends I'd lost. She reached out to them personally, explaining in broad strokes what had been happening, asking them to give me another chance. Most of them did. They welcomed me back with open arms, told me they'd suspected something was wrong, said they wished they'd known how to help. A few didn't respond, and I had to learn to accept that some friendships couldn't survive the damage he'd done to them. She encouraged me to start freelancing again, taking on small graphic design projects to rebuild my portfolio and my confidence. She connected me with people she knew who needed logos or websites or marketing materials. Small projects at first, things I could handle while also focusing on therapy and healing. You have real talent, she told me one day. Don't let what my son did to you take that away. 6 months after my husband went to jail, I landed my first major client. A small tech startup needed a complete rebrand, from logo to website to business cards to social media presence. The project paid $15,000 and took 2 months to complete, working nights and weekends while I rebuilt my life. I poured everything I had into it, channeling all my emotions into the work. Every design choice felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. When they loved the final product and asked if I'd be willing to stay on as their part-time creative director, I said yes without hesitation. It was validation I didn't know I needed. Proof that I had value beyond being someone's wife. Proof that my skills and talents mattered. For the first time in years, I felt proud of myself. Proud of something I'd accomplished. Proud of work I'd done with my own hands and my own skills and my own creativity. My husband got out of jail after serving 4 months of his 6-month sentence. Released early for good behavior that apparently he could fake when it suited him. I knew because his mother called to tell me, to warn me, to make sure I was being careful and vigilant. The police had also called to inform me, giving me the date and approximate time of his release. I'd immediately checked all my security systems, made sure the cameras were recording, kept my phone charged and on me at all times. He violated his probation within a week. The first few days, he'd been quiet. No contact, no attempts to reach out. I'd started to hope maybe he'd learned something. Maybe he'd moved on. Then one night, I woke up at 2 a.m. to the sound of someone pounding on my front door. It was him, drunk, screaming, pounding so hard I thought he might break the door down, screaming threats, screaming that this was his house, screaming that I'd stolen everything from him, screaming that his mother was a traitor who deserved to die. I called 911 from my bedroom while the security system recorded everything. Neighbors called the police too, woken by the noise. By the time the officers arrived, he'd kicked in my mailbox and was trying to break a window. The police arrested him again. This time, the judge wasn't interested in second chances or early releases or good behavior. The judge had warned him at sentencing what would happen if he violated probation. The judge added another year to his sentence and made it clear that the next violation would mean serious prison time, not just county jail. He's spiraling, his mother said when we met for coffee. His life is falling apart, and he blames everyone but himself. Do you ever regret it? I asked. Turning him in? She thought about that for a long time. I regret that he became the kind of man who would hit his wife. I regret every choice I made that led to that moment. She looked at me. But do I regret protecting you? Do I regret making sure he faced consequences? No, never. A year after the initial incident, I met someone new. A kind man who worked at the coffee shop I'd started frequenting, a place that had become my refuge during the hardest days. His name was David, and he had warm brown eyes and a smile that never felt like it was asking for anything in return. At first, I just noticed that he made good coffee. Then I noticed that he remembered my order. Then I noticed that he asked me how my day was going and actually seemed to want to know the answer. We started talking. Just small talk at first. The weather, the book I was reading, the project I was working on at my laptop in the corner booth. Those conversations gradually got longer and more personal. He told me about his family, about his brother who was a teacher and his sister who was a nurse. He told me about his degree in literature and how he'd ended up working at a coffee shop because he loved the community aspect of it. He asked me about my design work, and he asked questions that showed he was actually interested. After 3 months of these conversations, he asked if I'd want to get coffee somewhere else, outside of his work. Just as friends, he made clear, no pressure. I said yes, but my hands shook the entire time I got ready for that first coffee date. We met at a different coffee shop across town. We talked for 3 hours about everything and nothing, art and books and music and whether pineapple belonged on pizza. He made me laugh, something I hadn't done much of in years. When we said goodbye, he didn't try to kiss me or even hug me. He just said he'd had a great time and asked if I'd want to do it again. We went on friend dates for 2 months before I told him about my marriage. We were walking through a park and he just told me a funny story about his nephew, and I realized I wanted him to know. I needed him to know before this went any further. So I told him, not everything at once, just the basics, that I'd been married, that it had been abusive, that I was still healing. I expected him to make excuses to leave, to decide I was too damaged, too complicated, too much work. Instead, he stopped walking and turned to face me. Thank you for trusting me with that, he said. I promise I will never hurt you, never. And he didn't. Not when I accidentally broke his favorite mug while doing dishes at his apartment. Not when I was running late and made us miss the start of a movie he'd been wanting to see. Not when I was in a bad mood because of a difficult client and snapped at him unfairly. He just loved me, patiently, consistently, respectfully. On our first anniversary, David proposed. I said yes, but only after making sure his mother approved. She'd become like family to me, the mother figure I'd needed but never had. He's a good man, she said after meeting David for dinner. A genuinely good man. You can see it in the way he looks at you, the way he listens when you talk. You deserve this. We got married in a small ceremony at the courthouse, the same place where I'd filed for divorce 2 years earlier. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone there. Walking into that building as a bride instead of a scared woman filing restraining orders felt like reclaiming something that had been taken from me. His mother walked me down the aisle. She wore a beautiful blue dress and held my arm with a grip that was both supportive and proud. David's family was there, his parents and siblings and their kids, all of them warm and welcoming from the moment I'd met them. They'd heard my story and had never made me feel like I was damaged goods or a charity case. A handful of close friends attended, the friends who'd stuck by me or come back when I'd reached out. Dr. Rodriguez was there, sitting in the second row, smiling like a proud parent. Even the lawyer who'd handled my divorce and restraining orders came. It was perfect. Small and intimate and filled with people who actually cared about us. There wasn't a dry eye in the room when we exchanged vows that we'd written ourselves. David promised to be patient with my healing, to never use his strength to intimidate, to build a home where I always felt safe. I promised to trust him even when it was hard, to communicate instead of hiding, to build a future together instead of running from the past. My ex-husband got out of jail for the second time on a Tuesday. By Thursday, he'd violated his probation again, this time by calling his mother and threatening her. The recording of that call resulted in an emergency hearing. The judge sentenced him to 3 years in state prison. It's finally over, his mother said. He's going away for real this time. But it wasn't over. 3 months later, on a sunny Sunday afternoon when David and I were grocery shopping for a dinner party we were planning, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, it was a detective from the state police. Ma'am, I need to inform you that your ex-husband escaped during a prison transport approximately 4 hours ago, he said, his voice professional but urgent. He overpowered a guard during a medical transfer and fled the scene. We have units searching the area, but we wanted to warn you to take precautions. The groceries in my hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy. David saw my face and immediately took my arm, guiding me to sit down on a nearby bench. Where did it happen? I asked, my voice sounding far away. About 90 miles from your current location, the detective said. We don't believe he has access to a vehicle, but we can't be certain. I've already contacted your mother-in-law as well. We're increasing patrols in both your neighborhoods. That night, David insisted we go stay in a hotel. Not just any hotel, but one 50 miles away registered under his brother's name. We threw clothes into suitcases with shaking hands. His mother did the same, though she refused to leave the area entirely. Instead, she hired private security to watch her house and stayed with David's parents. For 2 weeks, we lived in that hotel room. David took time off work. I tried to work remotely but couldn't focus. Every sound in the hallway made me jump. Every time my phone rang, my heart raced. The police kept us updated daily. They'd found evidence that he had stolen a car within hours of escaping. They'd tracked him heading west on the highway. Then the trail went cold. His mother called me every day, sometimes multiple times, checking in. We'd both installed tracking apps on our phones so we could see where the other was at all times. We'd created code words in case one of us was in danger but couldn't speak freely. We'd prepared for every scenario we could imagine. I should have pushed for more time, his mother said during one call, her voice heavy with guilt. This is my fault. This is his fault, I corrected her, echoing the words Dr. Rodriguez had repeated to me countless times. He made every choice that led here. We protected ourselves. That's not wrong. The manhunt intensified. His face was on the news. There were tips called in from 3 different states, none of them credible. David's family rallied around us, his brothers taking turns driving by our house to make sure it was secure, his sister bringing us food at the hotel because neither of us had much appetite. On day 13 of the manhunt, I woke up at 3 a.m. from a nightmare where he had found us. David held me while I cried. whispering reassurances that we were safe. He never showed up at our door. They found his body in a ravine 200 miles away, at the bottom of a steep cliff where a mountain road curved sharply. The autopsy showed a blood alcohol content of 0.19. The investigation concluded he'd been driving too fast on an unfamiliar mountain road and missed a curve. He died on impact. At the funeral, only 3 people showed up: me, my husband David, and his mother. There were no other family members. His father had been an only child, and both grandparents were long dead. His mother's sister refused to come, still angry about her house burning down all those years ago, even though it had never been officially proven. There were no friends. The business associates who'd once courted his favor when he was CEO were conspicuously absent, probably worried about what his tainted reputation might do to their own careers. The funeral director had clearly expected more people. He'd set up 40 chairs. Only 3 were occupied. His mother stood at the casket for a long time, her hand resting on the dark wood, and I wondered what she was thinking. What do you think when you bury your only child? When that child became a monster and you had to be the one to stop him? I loved you, she said quietly, and I realized she was talking to him, talking to the closed casket and the body inside. I loved you so much it hurt. But you became the one thing I promised myself I'd never tolerate again. You became your father. And I couldn't let you destroy another woman the way he destroyed me. She paused and I saw tears rolling down her face. I'm sorry I couldn't save you from yourself. I'm sorry I failed to break the cycle before it infected you. But I'm not sorry I stopped you. She turned to me then. I want you to know something. That first night, when I pulled the gun, when I called the police, I was terrified. Not of him, of losing you, of failing another woman the way I was failed. She took my hand. But I also knew that I couldn't live with myself if I did nothing. You saved my life, I told her. We saved each other, she replied. 3 years have passed since that Sunday dinner when everything changed. I run my own successful design agency now, with 4 employees and a client list that keeps growing. We've worked with over 50 companies, from small startups to established businesses looking to rebrand. My work has been featured in design magazines. I've been asked to speak at conferences about building a business from the ground up. David and I bought a house together, a beautiful place with a big backyard and room for the family we're planning to start soon. We adopted a dog, a rescue named Penny, who was afraid of everyone when we first brought her home. Watching her learn to trust again felt like looking in a mirror. His mother, who insists I call her mom now, visits every week for dinner. She's become an essential part of our lives, our family. She's the grandmother our future children will know, the one who will spoil them and tell them stories and show them what strength looks like. She sold the family estate and bought a smaller house by the ocean. She spends her days volunteering at a women's shelter, helping other survivors find their way out. A year ago, I started a nonprofit organization. It started with a single conversation over coffee with his mother. We were talking about everything we'd been through, everything we'd learned, and she said something that changed my perspective completely. We can't be the only ones, she said. There have to be thousands of women out there right now, sitting in houses with men who hurt them, believing they have no way out, believing no one will help them, believing they deserve it or caused it or can't survive without him. She was right. And sitting there in that coffee shop, we started planning. We filed the paperwork for nonprofit status. We set up a website with resources and a hotline. We created a fund using money from the settlement his mother had given me. Money I didn't need because David supported us and my business was thriving. We put together a board of directors made up of lawyers, therapists, former law enforcement officers, and survivors. It's still small, still growing, but we provide emergency funds to domestic violence survivors who need to escape quickly. Women who can't wait weeks for restraining orders to be processed or for shelters to have openings. Women who need money right now for a security deposit on a new apartment, or for a bus ticket to another state where they have family. Women who need to pay for a lawyer to file protection orders or for a phone that their abuser doesn't have access to. We help them document abuse the way his mother documented mine, teaching them to take photographs of injuries, to save threatening text messages, to keep journals with dates and times and witnesses. We connect them with lawyers who will work pro bono or on sliding scale payment plans. We find them safe housing, sometimes in our network of volunteers who've opened their homes, sometimes in extended stay hotels we pay for until they can find something permanent. We provide job training and resume help for women who haven't worked in years because their abuser wouldn't allow it. We do all the things his mother did for me, all the things no one did for her, but for strangers who have no one else. And every woman we help feels like a small victory. Like we're breaking the cycle one person at a time. She sits on the board of directors. She interviews applicants personally, looking them in the eye and telling them her story, showing them her scars, promising them that escape is possible and that they deserve it. She shares her story, and mine, with anyone who will listen. She's tireless in her mission to make sure no other woman has to suffer alone. This is my penance, she told me once. For all the years I did nothing. You did everything that mattered, I replied. When it counted most, you did everything right. On the wall of our nonprofit office, we have a plaque with a quote I wrote. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's making sure the next generation doesn't have to be afraid. Below it is a photograph from my wedding day. His mother and I standing together, smiling. 2 survivors, 2 fighters, 2 women who refuse to let history repeat itself. Someone asked me recently if I've forgiven him. The truth is complicated. I don't know if I've forgiven him. I don't know if I need to. What I know is that I'm no longer defined by what he did to me. I'm defined by what I survived, by what his mother and I built together, by the women we've helped, by the nonprofit that's helped 47 women escape dangerous situations in the past year alone. Sometimes I still have nightmares. Sometimes I still flinch at sudden movements. Sometimes I still check the locks twice before bed. The trauma doesn't disappear. Healing isn't linear, but I'm healing, slowly, day by day, surrounded by people who love me without conditions, without violence, without fear. His mother told me something once that I think about often, especially on the hard days. We were sitting in her new living room with its ocean view, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, drinking tea and just being quiet together. I spent 30 years of my life afraid, she said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Afraid of my husband, afraid for my safety and my son's safety, afraid of what would happen if I left, if I stayed, if I fought back, if I gave in. Fear was the only constant in my life. It was like a sixth sense. Always there, always alert, always calculating the danger level of every situation. She turned to me then, and there was something peaceful in her expression that I'd never seen before. But the day I pointed that gun at my son, the day I chose you over him, the day I called the police on my own child, I stopped being afraid. Not because the danger was gone. I knew there would be consequences. I knew he would hate me. I knew I was destroying what was left of our relationship, but I'd finally made a choice. I'd finally acted instead of enduring. I'd finally used my power instead of pretending I didn't have any. She smiled. And nothing that happened after that, no amount of hatred from him or guilt from others, could be worse than another day of doing nothing while someone suffered. I understand that now, in a way I couldn't have when I was still living in fear. The power of finally making a choice, of refusing to be a victim anymore, of standing up even when you're terrified, especially when you're terrified, and saying clearly and firmly, no more. This ends now. I will not allow this to continue. My story didn't end the way I thought it would. I didn't rescue myself through sudden courage. I was saved by a woman who'd lived through her own nightmare and refused to let me live through mine. A woman who loved her son but loved justice more. And that's a kind of ending I never could have imagined. But it's the one I got. And it's the one I'm grateful for every single day. Because I'm alive. I'm free. I'm healing. And I'm making sure that other women get the same chance I did. That's his mother's legacy. Not the son who became a monster, but the women she helped save, the lives she changed, the courage she found when it mattered most. And that's mine too. I'm not just his ex-wife anymore. I'm not just a survivor. I'm a woman who builds things, who helps people, who loves and is loved in return. That wine glass that shattered on the floor that Sunday started a chain reaction that changed everything. It shattered my old life, but it also shattered my prison. And from those broken pieces, I built something beautiful, something worth fighting for.